This year, it's that sad day when one of the most important members of the family named Tristan prepares to pass away. All generations of the family treated him with deep reverence. What makes it even sadder is that today is his 100th birthday. Instead of joyfully celebrating his 100th birthday, he and everyone who came along will have to endure such a hard day. Tristan himself was a traveler between worlds. This time he was thrown into a place he had never been before. Here the man had absolutely no talents, and was not a gifted man. Life was quite ordinary, and something supernatural did not happen in it. The only plus of life here is that you can have a large number of concubines, who eventually gave birth to many children for Tristan. Also on this sad day, the wife of one of the third-generation great-grandchildren is struck by a child, so she was unable to attend the funeral. The rest of the family is gathered here. In that case, before passing away, it would have been nice to give them some guidance. Since there was not much time left, Tristan decided to tell a little saying that basically describes all human life. Spring comes and goes, everything in this world is fleeting, just like people's lives. Then the wise man asked what name the newborn would have. Since the family is now doing well and prospering, the name chosen was appropriately Jamie. Almost immediately after hearing the information, Tristan closed his eyes and fell into an eternal sleep. He had lived a decent life, so he deserved all the best conditions there in heaven. Everyone on the street low ducked, "Master, rest in peace." As he abruptly opens his eyes and a cheat system appears in front of him, initially it reported that a new descendant with spiritual roots was born. It's called the Family Prosperity and Success System. From that moment on, it was officially activated. For each descendant of the host, the system offers unique martial arts, incredible talents, divine pills and artifacts, 9-star capabilities, and other countless premium rewards. Tristan then decided to try to get up. He succeeded without any problems, even though he had literally just given signs of life. The guy who had just announced that the master was gone almost had his heart stopped, so much so that he was frightened. Also, the ladies, from the strong shock, almost lost their jaws. Just a few seconds later, the relatives standing in the street begin to weep violently, and at the same time rejoice that their ancestor has risen. It is impossible to describe in words what a person feels at such moments. It would seem how it is possible, but a miracle happened. In general, at first glance everything seems to be fine, but now there are many questions: the system of prosperity and success in the family, what it is in general. And what was the point of it, since it was only activated at the 100th year of life? Then a new notification popped up on the screen. Congratulations to the system owner, the rookie gift set has been urgently activated, 360 extra days of life have been gained. The spiritual roots of the Supreme Chaos, the Supreme Immortal Cultivation Technique were also obtained. In order for all of this to work correctly, one must maintain concentration and slowly merge with it. All this power generated a crystal that slowly flew towards Tristan's head and began to dissolve. Such a sight to see in his life cannot be seen by everyone, and even less to experience. Relatives have already begun to suspect that their master is becoming on the path of immortality. After the crystal ended, Tristan moved immediately to the 9th level of conjuration, and his body was rejuvenated to the age of 25. The system calls this process the formalization of the foundations, but if this is only the foundation, what will be next? Absolutely everyone who could speak congratulated the gentleman on his entry into the path of immortality. Relatives were madly happy about this event. Perhaps you are the best gift from the fate of the birthday. Just like that, literally in one moment, a terrible day of mourning became the best holiday ever. From that moment on, every child born into the family would be rewarded. Tristan, in turn, for every new life given, will receive longevity, and will be able to last even longer. So the generation of his sons is already in the neighborhood of 70 years old. On them certainly cannot have high hopes. The grandchildren are about 50 years old. This is already a more acceptable figure, and they can try to help. But the great-grandchildren are young. From now on, for the good of the family, they will work day and night, sowing seeds, so to speak. Tristan turned to one of his servants and asked him to give the young ones his orders. They must push on and give birth to more offspring, as many as possible, because in the future they will be very unique people and the strongest warriors. So 10 years have passed, the village is doing much better, many new buildings have been built, the development is in full swing. At the moment Tristan is alone in his territory drinking tea. For all this time he has not changed a bit, he is still young and handsome. As suddenly his very grown-up sons come to him, by order of their father they organize small weddings once in 3 days, and big ones once a week. Thanks to such events the family became famous for taking concubines from all corners of the world. For the past 10 years they have become the largest family. At this point, the master already has 330 descendants, 110 years out of 500, he has already earned himself a full 390 years of life on top of that. If he never stops this cycle of fertility, it is safe to say he is truly immortal. And as it turns out, Tristan lives all 10 years in seclusion, but there's a reason for that. The thing is, people who live far away from here still think that the master actually took his own life on his birthday. For optimal fertility growth it is better to keep hiding. The system only appears by the age of 100, so if you want one, value life properly. The Nayland family has come here to annul the marriage. Young Lady Elizabeth has been accepted here as a special apprentice by the head of the Jilan sect located in the cities of the same name. Her family has gathered here to provoke conflict. Then a notification comes into the system. There the master was congratulated for accomplishing another secret task, namely one of the descendants was favored in marriage. Then in such a case Delhi two choices. The first is to endure the humiliation, agree to the dissolution and receive 100,000 low-level spirit stones. The second option is to aggressively fight back, take the initiative, in this case, and be rewarded by the Emperor of Destiny Flame. The situation is of course very tense. The Emperor of Destiny is an ancient deity born from the essence of a fallen emperor. It can improve the abilities of spiritual roots and be passed on to others. The future of the entire family rests on the shoulders of the descendants' cultivation practitioners, just like that guy who was denied marriage, so the choice is clear. One must uphold one's interests, and the interests of one's family. From what we know now, the head of the Qingliang sect is one step away from becoming a gold core realm expert. So the guys are seriously planning on siding with their descendant Donald. The Nayland family is really trying to publicly humiliate everyone who gives their girls here. Don't penetrate. They're just trying their patience. But this is not a case where they're going to make concessions. They're going to defend their interests to the very end. From this moment Donald could not worry, because from now on there were very serious people behind him. The guy was extremely grateful that they didn't stand by and try to help. Meanwhile, the main hall of the Shao family was undergoing proceedings about the incident. The center of attention was the bride, Victoria, and her family. They are not satisfied that the girl who will be personally betrothed to the head of the sect should marry Donald, a mere commoner. In their opinion, Victoria is too good for the candidate she's been offered. Then Donald and his father walk in. The other side recognizes that the guy is attractive and polite in his own right. By all accounts he's certainly a good match for Victoria, but status-wise they're just not compatible, so they have to call off the engagement and look for a new candidate. Also the father of this lovely girl, Po, had left behind a high-level elixir body flow. This was done as compensation to the Shao family for the hassle provided. Nayland Po had acted rather generously, left behind an elixir purely for the dissolution of the engagement. He clearly had it all thought out, but no matter how, he was asking for a big favor. The most important thing was that at the end of the story, they would not leave the Shao family in debt. Then Tristan came into the room and said confidently that, in his opinion, it would not be possible to solve such an issue with just one vial. Then Donald said that the Nayland must take the elixir back and give it to those to whom it originally belonged, and as for the engagement, the Shao family could not agree to these terms. After hearing this, they were a little surprised, to say the least, that a child was trying to influence the outcome of events. Another problem was that Victoria was also against this wedding. Originally everyone thought that it was only her father's influence, but as it turned out that wasn't the case. Her mentors had explained to her that if the marriage took place, her cultivation might be in trouble in the future. In spite of this, the girl, as coming from a famous family, must realize that asking to break the engagement is a very shameful action. Of course, she did not like such words very much, as she felt that an ordinary man had no right to discuss such things with her. Does she really think that a normal person doesn't have the dignity and cultivate? After all, if you take away the support that the sect gives her, she is basically nothing. Also, the information that Donald is a normal person is not quite true, because he has long since entered the path of cultivation. Everyone in the room was delighted. It turned out that their close acquaintance was already in the 4th stage of perfection, only one step behind Victoria, who is a personal disciple of the sect leader. Victoria and her father were also, to put it mildly, speechless. They didn't understand how this was possible. Donald is now a full-fledged cultivator who has embarked on the path to immortality at such an early age. In that case, Victoria said she might postpone breaking off the engagement, but there was one condition she would not agree to without. It would seem like there are no conditions in this case, but let's hear it. Victoria wants to annul the engagement for exactly 10 years. At the end of that time, she'll challenge Donald to a one-on-one duel, and if the girl wins, she'll publicly break off the engagement. This is quite a bold statement, but as the ancestors of the Shao family used to say, live 30 years on the east bank of the river, 30 years on the west bank, but never underestimate the poor youth. Very well said and truly true. Usually people from poor families, being cold, will do anything to raise themselves and their families from their knees. Victoria wasn't too thrilled with the words, because she can't get it from a man who is below her level of perfection. Then the girl declares openly, within 10 years Donald himself will be on his knees begging her for mercy, and maybe even sooner. In that case, the guy took out a document from his pocket, left his bloody fingerprint in it, and handed it over for Victoria. At this moment, in front of her was not the desired engagement annulment document, but a full dissolution of marriage document from the Shao family. Starting from today, the Nayland and Shao families will never have any diplomatic arrangements again. Victoria had not expected such an outcome. For a moment she felt like a queen in this family, but she was quickly put back in her place, and correctly reminded that she was not at home. At this moment Tristan was still sitting on the beautiful terrace drinking tea. The second option had been successfully executed. The reward, as stated earlier, was the title of Emperor of the Fate of the Flame. The plan had worked just fine, and the reward for its successful execution was even better. The Shao family then asked the guards to escort the guests to the exit, and on their way out they returned their priceless elixir of purification, which they were going to buy off so easily. Victoria and her father didn't even know what to say, so they just turned and walked away in silence. That's what happens to those who try to go against the terms they agreed to. When it was all over, Donald made his way to the back of the mountain and saw Tristan in person. The master thanked his grandson for a job well done, and said that his progenitor had a thing that would help him relax, a token of his gratitude that must be accepted. Immediately, Tristan handed over the Emperor of Flame Fate to his grandson. So far his personal characteristics had not changed in any way, but in order for everything to start working, the guy needed to persistently improve his cultivation, and then the discovery of a new gift would not be long in coming. Another year passed. As Tristan sat in his territory meditating, he suddenly realized that some natural wealth was about to appear and decided to make sure of it. The system instantly notified him that a source of natural wealth had been found, and now a choice had to be made. Option 1 was to use his cultivation of a level 3 golden core to directly seal the entire Qinyan mountain, and appropriate all the treasures, the reward being a high-grade rank 5 magic weapon. The second option of the exodus of events, to act as if nothing happened. The reward is a high-grade magic weapon of the 3rd rank. It was decided to choose the second option because it sounded better, and there was nothing wrong with proceeding carefully. The reward was a high-quality magic armor of the 3rd rank, called the Floating Cloud Plate. Upon receipt it automatically adjusts to the size and shape of the wearer's body. It also adheres to the skin and becomes hidden armor. The plate becomes visible only in case of danger, so the opponent will be unpleasantly surprised. Now that the job is done, we must hurry home. This time, the system was somehow aggressive. It wanted to force its owner to seal the mountain. But Tristan definitely didn't care about that. It was better to quietly cultivate for now, and let the next generations prosper. After all, for a master, a long life and many descendants was the key to a better and happier future. The next morning, the local people were discussing the blinding purple light. Some of them even managed to quarrel about it. That bright light means some kind of treasure, perhaps even something left behind by the immortals. In that case, some of them decided to cooperate and go in search of that treasure. It's urgent to get everyone together, can't the Van family? Give them a chance to get there early, and they'll be bringing weapons, because it's a once-in-a-lifetime chance. In fact, to put it mildly, there's going to be a big fight for the treasure that Tristan apparently took yesterday. Meanwhile, on the back side of the Shao family's mountain, a carriage pulled by 2 horses was traveling. In it sat the acting head of the family, Tristan's eldest son. Apparently he is in a hurry, because he is always going faster. It can't be done because the road is narrow and the horses are too tired. In the end, he initially arrived at the Shao family's backyard, where the training ground is located. Then the son came to his father's carpet on foot. Of course, this urgent visit was arranged for a reason. The obedient son brought important news, which urgently needs to be discussed. Initially, the master smiled, because it's always nice to see family members around, and asked to sit down. At this moment, William was going through his mind that, even though he's over 80 years old, he's still strong, but he needs his father's spiritual energy to be happy. In general, the purpose of the visit was to tell that last night a mystical purple glow appeared in the Qinyan Mountains. A rumor spread throughout the area that a great treasure had appeared there, and early this morning, all the small and large clans in the area went to the mountains to search for it. Under no circumstances should other families be given a chance to lay their hands on such treasure. If his father agrees, William will immediately assemble a team and prepare to go to the mountain to find the treasure. But Tristan was not particularly excited by this news. Instead of giving the go-ahead, his father asked his son to remember the wisdom he had told him as a boy. You should always think things through carefully, plan before you act. That's why the Shao family never participates in these kinds of activities. They are pointless. Even if they manage to find them, it will lead to raids from other clans, and that is already a real war. It is better not to get involved from the beginning, but to quietly watch while the other families fight each other at one point. This way one can benefit even without taking part in the conflict. William had something to say to this decision, but since he felt so strongly about it, he couldn't be crossed. The Shao family's first priority was to strengthen the family and not to interfere in other matters. 3 days later, it was early morning, and Tristan was meditating as usual, when suddenly, thanks to his instincts, he realized that someone was approaching the house. Since he is a very spiritually advanced person, can with just one thought to move the person he needs. Without much thought, it can be done literally in a few seconds, and whether the opposite party wants it or not, everything will be as the master decides. Of course, not everyone is used to such magic tricks, so sometimes they are frightened, but in any case, after moving, they are pleasantly surprised. He came here today to tell us the latest and greatest news. It was about the sects and clans that went to fight for the treasure. There are even people from the Nayland family fighting there. Tristan was not surprised much because after the scandal they made over the breakup of the marriage, anything can be expected from them. Now the main task of the family is to stretch time and dawn the family tree. Only when the number of spiritual descendants increases, the family's power will continue to grow. Another 6 months passed. The system sent a notification saying that the number of descendants has increased to 400, and offered to make a choice. The first option is to start acting and secretly explore the Qinyan Mountains in search of treasures, and the second option is to choose stability and development, avoiding major conflicts and risks. It all looks very strange. The system again wants to send its master on a treasure hunt in the mountain, but now it's too dangerous there, considering that the mountain is cordoned off by one of the sections and they haven't found the treasure that way. Better security association. This time the master also decided to choose a simpler option, namely the second one, for which he received a small reward of one low-level spiritual fork. In order for it to work, it must be placed on an ordinary mountain, then it will help to form spiritual streams under the earth. After the work was done, Tristan immediately began to feel an incredibly rich aura, one could almost say magical. In such a case, it was necessary to take advantage of the spiritual vein and start cultivating in solitude. It should greatly speed up the process of all practices. Meanwhile, on Kainan Mountain, the head of his group was extremely dissatisfied with how his men were not working hard enough and not showing interest in treasure hunting, so he decided to go to extreme measures and show them clearly what would happen to them if they did not continue to work at a normal pace. In general, if anyone continues to do nothing, he will very quickly answer for it. Because the way is very far, people are too tired to work effectively. If you continue to give their best, it is more likely to lose their lives from overwork than from the main group. Since this person is also highly spiritualized, he began to illuminate how from the mountain of the Shao family, and interesting fluctuations of spiritual aura descend. This attracted his attention very much, because these sources are very useful, and thanks to them one can raise one's level several times faster. The name of this powerful man is Michael. Because he was too much interested in all this, he ordered his subordinates to watch and make sure that the young laborers from different families continued to search for natural fossils. In the meantime, the man himself went to the back side of the mountain to find out what had started the sudden fluctuations in the spiritual aura. The closer Michael got to their mountain, the stronger became the spiritual vibrations of some powerful aura, in which case to remain undetected he needed to contain his excitement, slow down and mask his own aura. But no matter how hard the man tried to hide his presence, the system detected him and alerted Tristan. She also offered two options for the outcome of events. The first option was to destroy him and receive combat experience, and a high-grade third-rank magic treasure for it. Or the second option was to make friendly contact, accept the guest and receive a high-grade second-rank magic treasure for it. Meanwhile, Michael had already reached the Shao family. After carefully investigating, he was unable to find any cultivators. Tristan, at this moment, was not in a hurry to choose any of the options, but just wanted to study the situation in more detail. On the way, the unwanted guest managed to find a low-level spirit vein, and was very rejoicing. The man was about to go back to the Qinliang sect and report it immediately, but it's not that simple. Whoever comes here uninvited doesn't get out easily. Tristan appeared before him like a ghost and started asking him what was going on. Naturally, this situation frightened Michael a bit. He realized that someone had managed to evade his detection. Low-level people are not capable of such a thing. The man decided not to get cocky, and said that he had gotten there by accident, because of the energy flow that had brought him here. Tristan also decided to behave well, and immediately appeared in front of the unwanted guest. Of course, had to introduce himself as a completely different person, so that the potential rival did not realize who stood before him in reality. Due to the fact that the master had managed to elude the detection skill, it suggested to Michael that the man in front of him was stronger than him, but not by very many levels. In general, there were too many temptations acting on the guest, and so far he was more inclined to the idea of attacking the master and taking everything he saw for himself. But so far, he was very doubtful that it was a good idea. As an apology for the sudden visit, Michael decided to give a high-quality elixir of recovery. It was quite expensive. He also offered to come to his sect to get to know everyone and establish good relationships. Only looking into his eyes, Tristan realized that every time this man felt a powerful and pure spiritual energy, greed overwhelmed his every cell. It was even hard to believe that he decided to apologize. In that case, the master decided to play it off as a joke, accept the gift, and promise that he would definitely come back for a visit. At this moment, Michael was constantly analyzing his potential opponent. He felt that Tristan's cultivation shouldn't be too advanced, which meant that he could take advantage of his unpreparedness and attack. On a pleasant note, after the learned gift, the boys said their goodbyes and began to converge. Michael was already imagining how he would capture this spiritual vein, and come back with all the who's who the chief elder and the golden core would be nothing to him. In just a few minutes of conversation, Tristan realized that this man was very skillful at hiding his real intentions. Their sect was only trouble so far, and the desire to destroy him was beginning to prevail. The impulsive decision was made to hit him first and hit him hard. You can't just let someone like him go. Michael didn't know yet that he was being attacked, but thanks to his gut, he already felt a powerful pressure on him, his heart inexplicably racing as if to warn of imminent danger, and in an instant the irreparable would happen. Tristan threw a strong, accurate punch, just as he'd planned. Michael couldn't believe that he'd actually been attacked at the most inconvenient moment, even after he'd given the gift. Though he didn't lose his life immediately, he wouldn't last long, because his vital organs had been hit. Tristan had been living on this land for more than 100 years, and he knew exactly what his interlocutor was really thinking and what his intentions were, so he decided not to hesitate and replied in the same way. Michael was madly curious about his intentions, because he was hiding them as deeply as possible. And then he started begging for mercy, admitting that he had been blinded by greed. As the pleas for mercy didn't work, the threats came. Michael assured Tristan that the whole sect would come here to avenge him. Well, he did respond to the threat. The desire to kill his opponent grew several times over. Of course, the master did not deny himself such a pleasure, and decided to end this insolent liar once and for all. Just one sword swing and that was it. Problem solved, one less enemy. Also, right after his breathing stopped, Tristan received a nice reward, a high-quality treasure of the 3rd level. Now we can only wish Michael wouldn't be so nasty in his next life, and then maybe he'll be lucky enough to live longer in this world. By the way, apparently the system got ahead of the master's choice because he got the award, which usually doesn't happen. Though a high-level item, and ideal for everyday use, but for a man who takes other people's lives, it's certainly not suitable, but as they say, it's not superfluous. Tristan also examined the storage pouch of his fallen opponent. But unfortunately, except for a handful of spiritual stones, some of which were ordinary elixirs, nothing could not be found. What a stingy guy, even saves on himself. After another 3 months, the adult son came to his seemingly young father again to report the information he had learned. In general, during this time, no one has been able to find the mountain treasure, and some clans are losing patience and are about to leave completely. The last immortal of the sect had left the mountain this morning. Tristan pretended not to know anything about the situation and listened with a supposedly surprised face. Now that there were no immortals left on the mountain, it was urgent to try to strengthen the Shao family. When William left the room, the system sent a new notification saying that the spiritual roots had reached 50 people, and there was a special reward, namely a new function called Heavenly and Ordinary Tao Field. It will increase the concentration of spiritual energy tenfold, and the cultivation speed will be doubled. Sounds like a true heaven on earth. The automatic absorption of 60 years of cultivation has been successfully completed, meaning that the master's personal cultivation has advanced to the 6th level of the Golden Core. Just as suddenly, another notification arrives. A new function has detected the invasion of a 1,000-year spirit. Tristan was shocked to say the least when he heard how old he was. Apparently the Qiliang sect is so persistent, and the rock is exactly his. Simply absorbing it would be considered a waste. Tristan made the decision to conquer it at once, and thus gain more lucrative bonuses. Without wasting a moment, the master flew to the point that was marked on the map to get the job done as soon as possible. In the meantime, there was a little boy playing at the treasure. He was shocked at how rich the spiritual energy was here, if this was some kind of world of the gods. Then Tristan appeared here and politely inquired as to what the kid was doing here, and if he needed help. But even though he was overly polite, the kid was very frightened. The master realized that with this escape technique, she could come and take the treasure and leave without leaving a trace. But for now, there's no point, because Tristan is on his home turf. Because spiritual energy is most concentrated within the field. It benefits not only the spiritual veins but also the field itself, so the richness of this place can compete with the secret places of large sects. Such strong spiritual energy is simply a magnet for similar precious spirits. They 100% will appear here with a certain periodicity. Of course, initially the kid tried to escape, but since he emits a strong energy, it wasn't hard for a professional like Tristan to find him. He was very frightened, because usually immortals absorb them and then get some sort of enhancement. But not this time. The master did not want to harm him, but rather even help him. To confirm his good intentions, he gently took the baby in his arms and began to stroke his head. When everyone seemed to calm down, the master offered the boy to become his apprentice. If everything goes well, at the end of the training, the child will be able to walk freely in the mountains and not be afraid of danger. The secrets of immortality cultivation will be applied to him, and he will become on this path. He liked this idea very much, and basically the words about immortality cultivation, so without thinking long he agreed. As soon as the guys made the deal, the system sent a notification of a successfully completed task, the reward for accepting the disciple of a 1,000-year-old ginseng spirit, 6 longevity pills, and 9 steps in the heavenly spirit technique. Since this child is called a ginseng who was reborn after thousands of years, Tristan decided to also name him Didia Ginseng. To make the acquaintance more pleasant, the master decided to make a small gift for his new student, namely to quickly teach him the 9 reincarnations divine arts technique. This is a high-level technique of the 3rd rank. Ginseng, out of curiosity, immediately asked what it was. The wizard decided not to answer for now, because the kid would find out soon enough. For now, he just had to relax his mind and surrender to the magic. After the procedures, the kid began to feel the scriptures in his mind. The next day the children started learning letters and spelling words. The first word they studied was the boy's name Ginseng. A child should know what his name means and how to spell it. Suddenly, Donald came to visit the master. I wonder what brought him here. He came here to say goodbye as he is about to be poisoned on a very long journey. In his opinion, the search for one's own possibilities often involves one's own real adventure. And as for the 10-year agreement, it's just fine. At the same moment the system sends a notification in which Prophet to make a choice. Option 1 not to allow to travel and train on his own, Option 2 to allow to travel. Because Tristan had been thinking for quite a while, Donald even managed to get nervous. But it was a minor scare. The master decided to agree, and don't stop his grandson from finding himself in the world. As they say, to become a precious stone jade must be polished. The main thing is to be careful and do not forget about his native quiet harbor. Donald was very grateful that his grandfather agreed and didn't cross him. There were even tears of happiness in his eyes. He ducked in front of him and thanked him once again. Reward for making such a decision: magic weapon, a high-quality sword of the 3rd rank. There is no point in banning it, because all fledglings fly someday. In order not to send Donald his bare hands, the master decided to give him a magical weapon that should help him on such a difficult path. It is the same sword that just issued the system for the completed task. In any case, the young warrior, this thing will definitely be more useful. When Donald came out of the door, he examined his gift, and gave himself his word that he would not let his master down, and would return home strong, manly, and with many gifts for his relatives. Tristan had sent his grandson on this journey, and Talo had put the best into him. At least for the first time he should have good luck. A few months later, in the early morning, the master system sends a new notification to the master, stating that descendant Donald Luck had met the new master and received guidance, which greatly accelerated his cultivation. After reviewing his grandson's stats, Tristan found that he had already reached level 3. I wonder who was so special that accelerated Donald's progress to such a scale. Almost seems like cheating. Meanwhile, the young man was sitting in some cave, and a magic ring could be seen on his hands. It is through him that the boy constantly feeds his new master with spiritual energy, and in return he helps him to become stronger and stronger. And when he becomes a full-fledged disciple, the master will certainly pass on all his knowledge to him, and then the level of spiritual energy will increase even faster. It had been 5 more years since Donald had set off on his journey. Tristan did not do anything new during this time. He was still raising the level of his spiritual development and contributing to the further development of his family. But on the Qingyun mountain, the Qingliang sect was not quite calm. Their sect leader was also meditating as usual on this day. But finally, after a large number of years, he was able to launch a divine test. The sect leader was about to advance to the next level of the Golden Core. Severe bad weather began to form around. Dark clouds covered the entire mountain, and huge streams of energy began to be attracted to their leader. The ordinary inhabitants have to run away immediately, because they could be struck by lightning by accident, and as everyone knows, it's almost impossible to survive such a thing. After a few minutes, the head literally began to fly to the heavens. He could feel all the spiritual energy of heaven and earth quickly enveloping his body. His aura was growing uncontrollably. It was still hard to imagine what level it could reach. If everything went well, the leader would become one of the strongest warriors ever. This man's name is Travis. He had been preparing for this event his whole life, and finally on this day his power would reach the peak of the Golden Core, and the divine test would be complete. When the whole process was complete, he landed on the sparring ground. All those who were around at that moment congratulated him and stood in front of them, because these are historical events. Including Victoria, she came to the center of the platform and sincerely from the bottom of her heart congratulated her master on successfully passing the thunderstorm test and reaching a new stage in life. Then Travis asked her a question, because the girl had visited the Shao family a couple of years ago to break the engagement. Victoria confirmed that information and said she'd made a 10-year pact with a guy. The downside is that he's such an unpleasant person and lives in a different world. Travis liked her negative view of the family. At the same time, Tristan, as usual, sat at his mountain and meditated. Today the system brought him very pleasant news. The number of descendants finally exceeded 1,000 people, and for this he receives a small reward, namely a sapling of fruit tree ginseng. In how much this subject is directly related to apprentice ginseng, the master decided to call him here and talk to him. In these 5 years, the kid has already grown considerably, and has become more like a real man. It's hard to even describe in words how much during this time he was fond of his master. Due to the fact that the family ginseng, naturally educated and spiritual being, his innate talents simply amaze all ideas. Such an apprentice is a dream for every master. The boy is developing very rapidly, and is far ahead of his peers. In the future he may turn out to be a very worthy leader or even better. Tristan handed over this fruit seedling and asked me to plant it somewhere in the yard. It should be closely monitored, always watered in time, and if it did not grow, it should be replanted. Ginseng, like an obedient student, immediately set to work and promised to do his best. By the way, it's interesting to look at the current state of the Shao family. Now the maximum age of Tristan, from 500 years old, has risen to 1200, and the descendants are already a whole 1005 units. This is just incredible results in 5 years of time. The family is prospering, and Master was very happy about it. It directly shows that he is doing the right thing. Suddenly, the man caught himself thinking that he hadn't had a goatee in a long time. Ginseng spirit pulls a lot of energy. It is urgent to return to his chambers and continue cultivating. After all, in true professionals, the energy level should be filled to the maximum, despite all external factors. As soon as the master reached his hiding place, the system sent him a new notification. It was time to fulfill the 10-year contract that Donald had made with his fiancée. At first Tristan couldn't believe 10 years had come so quickly. Without this system, he might have had time to grow grass. In this case, the system has also prepared 2 choices. The first is to use a strong attack, and thus help his grandson in the battle, and the second is to believe in him, and let him decide everything on his own. Since Donald has made a lot of progress in the meantime, it's obvious that the second option should be chosen. Meanwhile, at the sparring ground of the Qingliang sect, there were quite a few guests. All of them came here on this day to watch the battle between 2 young but very strong warriors. The highlight of it all is that if the girl wins, she will take the guy's life without any hesitation. At this moment, the presenter is introducing to the audience the contestants who will meet today in a fair fight. Before the start of the fight, the guy said to himself that during this time he has grown into a strong and fair man, therefore, the victory should be for him. And Victoria convinced herself that in front of her was a mediocre talent, with which to cope with should not leave much difficulty, so she relies on very high hopes, this victory for very significant. As soon as the command to start the fight sounded, the girl was the first to rush into action. In her first blow, she put all her potential into it. The technique of the fierce heavens was applied. If one looked at Donald, one would know that on this particular day, nothing would be able to break him. This strike, he was able to easily block in a single sword touch, without much effort. When the first contact occurred, the girl saw that her potential husband came back with a 6th level of spiritual development. The man she had a bad opinion of came back with the same level of cultivation as hers. At that moment, Victoria tensed to say the least. She couldn't even think that Donald could become so much stronger in such a period of time. The guy activated the sword of the hovering dragon and unleashed its full potential. A large blue dragon was formed above his head, which was preparing to go into battle at the order of its master. At this moment, Victoria was simply speechless. The energy of the 9 swords merged in the air and formed an azure dragon with 5 claws. The situation is just terrible. How can you even block such blows? But then the girl remembered that she was a junior sect master, and she shouldn't lose face. So she began to give her best, and used her hidden talent, which she should only use in extreme cases. If it lasted too long, it could have a negative effect on her health. She fought at this pace until Victoria simply collapsed to the ground. Now it was certain that the girl had lost in this 10-year agreement. Now Donald had the right to decide what to do with her. Of course, realizing how bad it was, Victoria began to beg to be left alive. Today, for the first time, she felt what fear really was. For some reason, Donald didn't even want to talk to her. He just came back and left. On the one hand, it was right. There was nothing to talk about with the man who had been saying the worst things behind her back all her life. Victoria involuntarily started to cry. She realized that she would never be able to comprehend such power as Donald, and she had also embarrassed her family. And then the guy was stopped by his rival's family. They couldn't just let him go because if they did, their reputation would be ruined, and that can happen. Donald said right off the bat, he doesn't want to fight anybody else. But if he keeps getting pushed around, who he's gonna answer fast and hard. Among these guys there was an elder with a 9th level cultivation level of core consciousness, and the weakest one with a 6th level. It was almost impossible to resist these guys, but this had absolutely no effect on Donald's martial spirit. Even though he had just finished a fierce duel, and his energy had been depleted to almost nothing. As if it was the end of his arm, unprecedented energy began to flow in, and his personal cultivation level skyrocketed. He had reached the middle of the golden core path's development, if it was the new master who had helped him at such a difficult time in his life. This frenzied flow of energy was even felt by the opponents. They immediately realized that he had taken some unusual and by the level of cultivation exceeded them all. But it was too early to worry. After all, such a drastic enhancement has its own side effects. Donald didn't worry about it at all, because it was a direct blessing from the master. Now, instead of the small dragon that the guy demonstrated during the fight, there would be a huge dragon, which in essence became several dozen times stronger. I am not as sweet as it may seem at first glance. Such a blow took absolutely all energy. While the elders are in the air, it is necessary to take advantage of the moment and run away. But in an instant, the intimidating pressure from the golden core was instantly piled on Donald. At first it was still bearable. After just a couple of minutes, a violent cough began, which was accompanied by bloody discharges. Then on the battlefield appeared. He asked the young man to stop, to get on his knees and apologize, then he would be left alive, otherwise things could end much worse. Donald was getting worse by the second, and more was coming out of his body. It was clear from his situation that the 10-year contract was nothing more than a joke, because no matter what the outcome, it would be impossible to leave this place. The Shao family does not raise weak people. Since Travis was facing a very stubborn man, he decided to act decisively, and immediately attacked the boy who was barely standing on his feet. As suddenly, at the very last moment, the master makes an attempt to contact his apprentice through the ring. He asks to give him the use of the guy's body. To defeat such an opponent, the sex's loss on the battlefield should not be squelched. Everything will be fine. Donald will only have to take a little nap, but next time he'll have to rely only on himself. Without much thought, the guy agreed, and completely handed over control of his body to his master. The head was almost 100% sure that the guy wasn't alive anymore, but he just disappeared without leaving any trace. Apparently Donald has a secret technique. In the moment Travis sensed his disappearance, but his divine consciousness couldn't keep track of where exactly he disappeared to. The head urgently ordered to find a couple of elders to lead a search team for the Shao family, eliminate every last one of them. In the meantime, Donald had moved to the cave where it all began. His face had a great deal of mutilation on it, and he was now fully recovered, and soon his body would be under his control again. A few days later, Tristan went to the mountains for a very important event. He is currently at the peak of the 9th level of the Golden Core. Today is the time for him to reach the soul nucleation stage. The Shao family's ordinary people noticed that a violent storm was coming, so everyone was strictly forbidden to go near the family mountains. And the master was enjoying the process. After half an hour, everything was over, the sky was clear again, and the weather was sunny. Many people thought that the master was at a new stage of cultivation, but the elder assured them all that it was just a strong, fleeting thunderstorm, and everyone could go out and do their business. Tristan was extremely pleased with himself, for he had successfully entered the soul nucleation stage. Jensen ran to him at the first opportunity to see how he was doing. In fact, everything went just fine. The stormy ordeal of soul nucleation was a breeze. In such a case, the disciple can only congratulate his master on his new stage. May the path of his martial arts flourish further. No stormy ordeal can cripple the master. Then the boys went to the room to further practice their spiritual practices. Tristan was once the most ordinary person who worried about birth, aging, disease, and so on. And now his life expectancy is over 1,000 years. This is simply unbelievable. As suddenly the system sends a new notification: disciples of the Qin Liang sect have been discovered in the territory. As always, the system offered two options for the outcome of events. The first is to punish them, namely, they also have all of them. The second option is to make a statement that we need a little more time to develop and watch what happens. Since the master wants stability, he must choose the second option. But on the other hand, if the Shao family disappeared and only Tristan was left, then what was the point? The Shao descendants should not allow outsiders to harm them, so in this case, the first option was definitely the right solution. As soon as the masters shared, the system instantly provided him with information on each of the attackers. There were only 10 of them. The strongest of them was the second elder, who was already at the 8th level of cultivation. You could say it was just a bunch of losers. They just didn't know what they had signed up for. Meanwhile, they had already landed in the territory. Their plan was very simple: to eliminate all the members of the Shao family. Leave no one within a 100-meter radius. Suddenly, Tristan appears in the center of the entire enemy crowd. The Church of Sinlin had always claimed to be fair, and it was hard to imagine that they would be so cunning and devious, in which case no one would be able to get out of here alive. So far, these words didn't scare them in any way, because their leader is a powerful man who surpasses all limits. And then they dared to attack the master. The guys and sects had already been invited to destroy him, but they didn't even roughly supply how powerful a man they were attacking. At least 3 people if alive in a few seconds. Just by the power of thought, Tristan controlled the swords that flew into the target. Everyone else immediately tensed up a bit. They could not understand where the hovering swords came from. Could it be some kind of trap? My guys immediately started sounding the alarm, saying it was time to retreat. But it was already too late. When the sect members looked up at the sky, they saw that there was flying a whole bunch of swords, which absolutely any moment can hit them directly. You can say in this situation, running away is the most pointless decision, which will only come to one outcome. This technique is called the swift sword technique. As practice shows, it's unforgiving. The enemies have already begun to openly say that they can't stop the Shao family, and the head is a man who is simply invulnerable. Apparently, in the midst of intense fear, the sect members were unable to assess the situation objectively, so we took the worst option of all, namely escape. The master, not thinking long, threw all the swords that were in the air at them, thus leaving not a single chance to the guys who had attacked. After they all stopped breathing, Tristan received his promised reward, namely the supreme treasure of the 5th level, the Azure Cloud Sword. From this moment on, the man possesses a first-class weapon. An ordinary spiritual sword can be retired. A worthy replacement has appeared for it. A few days later, the Qinliang sect's meeting room had a very important gathering to discuss the recent events that had happened in the Shao family territory. Travis was very angry, and urgently wanted to know who dared to destroy his elder. Everyone in that gathering realized for sure that the Shao family could not be evaluated. At that time, the elder was at the 8th level of base creation. A group of disciples also followed the same path, and they were all destroyed with just a single strike. The next day, it was as if nothing had happened. Tristan was testing his new cultivation method. As expected, the effectiveness of this method was twice as much. It was also customary to look at personal information. Life expectancy increased to 1,500 years, descendants currently numbering 1,278. With such a long life expectancy, Tristan will be able to support his family for many years to come, which is great. The master suddenly noticed a cultivator who had come from the Golden Core world, wondering what he had forgotten here. What was the purpose of his visit? After looking at his detailed information, the master learned that this person was the head of the Qinglian sect, and had very high energy levels. If the curator of the Golden Core world organizes a massacre in the Shao family, then everything will be over, and he has already started to do it. Innocent children and people are losing their lives on the street. We can't let this sect head leave our earth. We have to catch him, and then we will see what to do with him. Travis continues to walk around the territory with impunity. This place where he is now reminds him more of a city inside the Sunset City. He also comes to realize that Shao is really not so simple. For now, his plans here are to inspect everything thoroughly, and to make a perfect route for future attacks. Tristan decided to directly address the unwanted guest and ask him how he liked this city, whether he liked it or not. Cultivator, because of the shock, he froze in place and began to process the information. The Shao family is not what it seems at first glance. It is necessary to remain calm and do not show fear. The man replied that he was satisfied with everything, because the energy on these lands is just heavenly. As he entered this territory without invitation, he decided to apologize at once in order not to be rude. He also asked to apologize in person. Tristan said there would probably be no forgiveness, because normally in these parts, anyone who entered the territory uninvited would be killed almost instantly. There's absolutely no point in talking about making amends. Tristan had just made the best tea you can make in the whole territory. To drink it, one must come to the Shao Mountains for a private meeting. Literally in just a few minutes, the cultivator got here. Since he is at a rather high spiritual level, he can fly with great speed. Tristan introduced himself as the Shao family's teacher and asked his new guest to sit down while he slowly poured tea. The man was smiling in person, of course, but deep down, he was remembering the worst of what he was doing to this family. The man pretended to admire how great the Shao family had become. The man pretended to admire how great the Shao family had become. The man pretended to marvel at how great the Shao family had become. He also didn't forget to mention the power of Tristan's cultivation, because it was truly terrifying. At this point, the system started sending so many notifications about the increased desire to attack from the interlocutor that Tristan would rather do it himself so that those notifications would stop coming. After the tea party, the master decided to give a small tour of his house and show the relics he has. For example, this painting was created by the Lord of the Northern Bromine Pavilion, and next to it is the famous azure sword. It can saw iron into two pieces like meat. From this information, Travis realized that the master had contacts with large clans from various regions, but no one still knew his ancestry or who his original master was. The guest only trusted him halfway, but he managed to find out that there was only one cultivator in the Shao family, that was Tristan, and there was no trace of the others. At the end of the meeting, the guest said that today's meeting was an honor, and in the future he would definitely like to come back to enjoy these views once again. And as a farewell, the system received another notification of an increased desire to attack. Tristan wished him a safe journey. Travis was shocked that his identity had already been revealed. Now a sense of danger was brewing in him. Slowly, without anyone seeing, the master begins to use the swift sword technique, and directed a huge number of swords of this nasty man. All of them hit the target. Travis had planned to ambush him, but in the end he was caught in it. The master did not waste a minute and all this time prepared a powerful attack, which bore fruit. Tristan completely examined his potential opponent with divine sense, and could already firmly say that he definitely had no chance of surviving. After the attack was over, a fragment of an Elder of the Dark Soul Hall came out on Saturday. Even Tristan had never heard of such a thing before. But even if it is a puppet, it also deserves to lose its life anyway, because it is involved in this kind of exploration mission. While this spirit could still speak, it took the liberty of asking the master who he really was. Tristan laughed out loud, and called himself his father, and then destroyed the soul. At the same time, the owner of this soul, sitting in some prison, experienced great pain the moment his soul no longer existed. Because of his anger, the man promised himself to skin the one who had done it, and then to mince him. No one has the right to just destroy fragments of souls. And at the very end will extract the soul of his rival, and will burn it day and night with a blazing furnace. Do not let her finally lose her life, and then we'll do the same with the family. But you must never forget the main plan. You'll have to hold back your anger for a while. But the hour of reckoning is at hand. A few days have passed, the events in the Qinglian sect. Because of the disappearance of their master, all the elders were eliminated, so it turned out that the entire sect no longer has a leader, and every disciple is now as if on pins and needles, does not know what may happen tomorrow, and anything can happen. At this moment Victoria missed Daniel very much. She finally realized her mistake, and the mistake of her sect. In just one night the girl turned gray, and her hard heart crumbled like sand, all because the sect acted too powerful and threatened a lot of people, for which she paid. Some of the disciples who were smarter than him took over the resources of the sect and silently left the sect. All those who remained seemed to be immersed in their own private thoughts, and could no longer live as before. Pretty soon, there would basically be nothing left of this place. Just a few weeks later, the Qinglian sect announced its dissolution. For people from other cities, this news was a shock, because just a couple of days ago, their head was on the threshold of a new cultivation. People began to suspect that the sect had come the way of those who shouldn't have, and this led to such consequences. Meanwhile, in the mountains, Shao William once again came to his father to tell him about the recent events, namely the collapse of the sect that was a big nuisance. This time, the master decided not to hide, saying straightforwardly that he was the one who got rid of it. To say that William was shocked is not to say anything. He certainly didn't expect his father to eliminate her so easily. Then the master ordered to gather all the descendants of the family who had spiritual roots, then take them to the mountain and teach them the heavenly practices so that if anything happened, they would always be able to fight.